The proceeding
order, and welcome to the Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee. Regular viewers will notice I'm not Sir Robert Buckland, I'm Robert Goodwill. I'm chairing the meeting in his absence, and very much looking forward to this session, continuing our report into defence investment and the industry in Northern Ireland. We're very pleased indeed to have representatives of the big three. I think we've had them described. I think when Leslie Orr, who is the ADS Northern Ireland Director, described you as the door to making a major dynamic change, the big three investors. So perhaps we can start by asking you to introduce yourself, starting on my left with Ben, a short description of who you are and who you represent.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ben Murray. I'm the Chief of Staff and Corporate Affairs at Harland and Wolff. 160-year-old history in the sector and in the space, but in its current form, of course, just over 4 years old. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. You can't miss your cranes.
You can't.
Thank you very much. David?
Morning, Chair. My name is David McCourt. I'm the Director of Strategy and Marketing at Thales. So Thales are quite a large prime. We've got 80,000 people operating in 68 countries. We're quite proud that we're the only defence prime in all four nations of the UK, where we hire and employ 7,000 people. 700 of those are based in Belfast, where I live and where I work. And we've worked to establish ourselves as the centre of excellence for air defence and surface attack for the Thales Group.
Yes, I think everybody became aware of your existence when the NLAW missiles were so effectively deployed against the Russian aggressors in Ukraine, and an amazing bit of technology that's, I think, probably saved Kiev, to be honest. Thank you. And Nick?
Sir Robert, firstly, thank you very much allowing Spirit AeroSystems to come here and give oral evidence on defence spending in the region. Important to us, the prosperity of the province and the wider Northern Ireland economy. My name is Nick Laird. I'm the Managing Director of European Space and Defence in Spirit AeroSystems. My background, I spent 31 years in various senior appointments in the Ministry of Defence, both operational and capability programme facing. For the last 6.5 years, I've headed up the defence portfolio in Spirit AeroSystems. Spirit AeroSystems is one of the largest aerostructure companies in the United Kingdom. We employ over 3,600 people in our Belfast sites in and around the greater Belfast area, supported by over 240 Northern Ireland supply chain companies, and we account for over 10% of all Northern Ireland's exports. We have sovereign engineering and technology leadership in advanced composites and advanced materials. And we continue to look at the dual use of aerospace technologies into defence programmes. So we're very pleased to hear today.
And indeed, I've visited Spirit with the committee previously, where they were making A220 wing sections with composite materials, and very advanced manufacturing that we saw there. Indeed. Perhaps I could start out the questioning by asking you to set out briefly, and I think, Nick, you've done a little bit of that already, your presence of each of your businesses in Northern Ireland and the contributions of each of your operations to the Northern Ireland and overall UK defence picture. Probably start with Ben and fill in.
Thank you very much. So as I said in my previous response, the company has a 160-plus year history, perhaps one of the most well-known shipbuilding companies in the world. And today, the group comprises, as well as Belfast, 2 sites in Scotland, North Devon, and activities in the US too. All of that is built upon the history and pedigree that we have in Belfast, of course, which is well known. When the current owners of the company, Infrastrata as was, back in 2019, took the yard out of administration, there were around about 50 members of staff, 50 colleagues. Today we have just over 1,300 across all 4 sites, about half of that within Belfast. So you can see Belfast very much at the vanguard of the group's development. So that is 1,300 core members of staff, and they're working there day in, day out. And that ramp up from 50 to where we are now at 1,300 is primarily driven by the work that we're doing to get ready for FSS. So obviously we'll come on to that later, I'm sure, in terms of defence contracts. but the work that we are doing there in terms of getting the yard ready. So as part of that work, there's a £77 million investment programme in infrastructure. If you're due to visit, anybody is very welcome to visit at any point. You'll see steels now in the ground. You've got fabrication halls going up. What that's doing is extending our vast fabrication facilities already to make that match fit for future contracts, not just the FSS programme, but also commercial opportunities and future defence opportunities too.
Are you sort of 100% this big defence contract? Or is it other stuff?
No. So we have 5 markets in which we play. The idea when we took Belfast on was shipyards in the UK, but broadly elsewhere too, had been boom bust. You've been too focused on one market, and we decided to embed a strategy with 5 markets. So alongside defence, we have energy and renewables, cruise and ferry, and if you fly in or out of city at the moment, you'll see 2 cruise ships in at the moment, 2 US cruise lines that are being completely refurbished, painted, gutted, and made good for the commercial market today. We also have commercial marine, so we're building, you see barges going up and down the river here. We've got barges being built in Belfast. Good projects to get skills back in place to help transfer skills and expertise from some of the older guys and colleagues to some of those newer apprentices and others that we're bringing into the business. And alongside, as I say, we have energy and renewables, which is anything from oil and gas projects through to renewables. So it's I think we're a pretty significant player already in Northern Ireland, but our ambition is to continue growing at the rate we are, to be able to demonstrate track record with FSS and other naval contracts we have, commercial contracts, more cruise work, getting into renewables. The ability is to continue to grow that, because colleagues will know that the yard used to be a lot bigger back in the day. We're quite pleased with the rate of growth and the trajectory we're on, but to be able to continue to do that, we want to build upon this and be able to support the wider ecosystem that exists in Northern Ireland, of course working with the rest of the businesses we have across the group.
So when you're sort of at peak activity on this big defence contract, what proportion of your overall business in Northern Ireland will that make up, do you think?
It'll be the vast majority for that period of time in Northern Ireland. So the FSS programme is creating 900 jobs in Belfast, 300 in Appledore, 800 further throughout the supply chain. We're already at 1,300 in Belfast. Not everybody who's currently with us will be working on FSS, so you'll see an increase in that figure. We already have the vast majority of the production staff. We need the engineers, the managers, and we're slowly ramping up the blue-collar colleagues, if you like, to be able to ramp up to the level that we need when we need them, because you don't need everybody at once, obviously. You don't want to have people sitting around not working. So when we bring in contracts, be it barges, be it cruise lines, be it a big FPSO contract we have at the moment from Canada, worth around 60 million, we're ramping up slowly with work, so we're not in a place where we have the wrong people with the wrong skills to deliver the projects that we want to deliver.
Thank you. And David, I'm guessing you're pretty much 100% defence based in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, it's predominantly in the defence industry. So again, 700 people. There is 100 of those that are also based in Crossgar, also with Belfast, where the final assembly happening. So it's predominantly defence, manufacturing, designing effects or missiles. Particularly, I mean, we've relied very heavily in the past 10 years in the export market, but we're, developing more in that domestic. Our order books in 23 and 24 grown exponentially as a result of what happening in Ukraine. So we've doubled our production lines. We hope to double those even further. But what we really want to achieve is long-term sustainable endeavours with our customers. One of the things that was touched on very heavily in the previous select committee was about SMEs, and we supply SMEs quite heavily. I mean, our local supply into is 91% of SMEs, but we're looking to grow that a lot more. So we're really looking to get that kind of long-term relationship and partnering in the domestic market, develop that even further. And then looking at the exponential growth in the export to really help with that also.
Yes, thanks. And Nick, you've already touched on this.
Yeah, so 80% of our business is commercial aerospace, and you have seen that. The remaining 20% is a mixture of maintenance, repair and oversight, and our defence and space activity. Within the defence and space activity, We have a number of sub-strategies, next combat aircraft, and we're part of the Tempest programme going forward, which I'd like to maybe just unpack a little bit later on as a potential pipeline for investment in Northern Ireland. But we're also been involved in the MOD's large unmanned mosquito programme for the Ministry of Defence, and we have another number of strategies on hypersonics where we're working with the Ministry of Defence, which I will not be able to go into detail in this public domain. But we understand and recognise that the defence sector can pull a huge amount of activity into Northern Ireland, which is one of the reasons why we commissioned RUSI to do this independent report last year to highlight the untapped potential and how a lot of technology, not only at the primes, the tier ones and the SMEs, can be brought into the fore and utilised within the Ministry of Defence. We sense that there's a degree of regional industrial blindness, and I think that's played out in some of the funding or defence funding allocation over the last couple of years, and I'm quite happy to highlight a couple of areas of that later on if we get into.
Because Northern Ireland and Yorkshire and the Humber seem to come out quite badly.
Correct. Well, I will segue very quickly into that.
Thank you. We'll come on to that later.
You will come on to that later. So we've got ambitions to grow our defence opportunities with the Ministry of Defence. Interestingly, from a defence perspective, we do more activity, garner more revenue from exports with another NATO nation than we do from the MOD. And that's interesting because they fully understand the novel and the world-class sort of activity that we are doing in Belfast, and they are currently leveraging that technology. So it's an interesting piece. We want to do more exports.
The United States we're talking about?
No, a European NATO country. Right. It's interesting because we feel that any new programs, and I would like to touch on the new medium helicopter program at some stage, because that's a huge opportunity for Northern Ireland, and exports is very much at the heart of that. So I'll draw stumps there, and we'll maybe come back to that, Sir Robert.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, real pleasure to see you here, and I could say special pleasure to see you, Nick, as a fellow Strangford constituent, and I'm very proud to be your MP, by the way. Just to say that I understand the importance of this, and there's three questions I want to focus on if I can, Mr. Chairman. First one is on the SMEs, really important. I think the three big businesses, and you've outlined where your role is, and that's really important. But SMEs, because you're the pyramid that funnels out to all SMEs elsewhere. So your role and relationship with them, number one question, that's probably for all three of you. Also very interested in Mr. Chairman, in the issue of apprentices. I know from my, I think, Harland and Wolff, I think you did a presentation here maybe over a year and a half ago, and that was a question I'd asked that person who was presenting. So I know there's a commitment to apprenticeships. I know there's definitely a commitment to apprenticeships in Spirit and also in Thales as well. And my good friend and colleague from for East Belfast has told me that there's more people from Strangford that work in Thales than there is working from East Belfast. So obviously our role that we play in Strangford is one to ensure that all the commitment to defence is important.
Well done mentioning Strangford, Jim, by the way.
Twice. Don't twice, and I may even try to get it a third time, but I'm coming to the reason for that, Justin. And the third thing I want to ask is a specific question to Harland Wolff. You mentioned renewables and the importance of renewables. Cannot ignore that, and I think you have a key role to play in that as well. And the reason now, you know about the contracts for difference and the fact that Northern Ireland isn't just in that scheme yet, but now with the assembly up and running again, there's a real key opportunity to advance that. I suppose if I can maybe just throw all these questions at once. I'm sure you'll not forget all the questions and reasons. I feel that Northern Ireland hasn't got the potential or the encouragement perhaps from government centrally here when it comes to procurement, when it comes to increasing the defence activity of businesses in Northern Ireland. And when it comes to a regional programme hub, I think that's one that you probably, Nick, are particularly interested in. Could you perhaps maybe tell us how you see the defence potential and explain the recommendation? Sorry, I hope you can all follow those questions. Each person's got a question, and if I can leave that, Mr. Chairman, with the gentleman to respond accordingly. Thank you so much.
I'll maybe start that. So if I can just unpack the regional spend piece, because I think it's really important to understand the context of that. So we have seen over the last two defence spend rounds that defence spending allocation to Northern Ireland has moved from 0.5% to 0.76%. And despite the government saying that's a notable increase across all the regions, I would beg to differ. What that really equates to is about £100 per head in Northern Ireland in defence spend. The regional average across the whole of United Kingdom and Northern Ireland is just under 400. And then if you look down at the southeast and the southwest regions, the funding, so that funding last year was 186 million to Northern Ireland. The southeast region garnered 6.3 billion and the southwest 5.8. And if you look at the southwest, that equates to about just over £1,000 per person. Okay, so there is disparity in the regional allocation, etc. This is not about Northern Ireland becoming a special case. No. This is all about parity of opportunity.
Is that just investment in equipment,
no,
or is that the overall?
That's
so
defence
it's like
spend.
Big bases and all that.
Defence spend.
Yeah.
And if I can just put this into context, because I think it's quite useful, 186 million for the last year. Last May, the Secretary of State for Transport announced 190 million in funding for the allocation of creating 121 miles of cycling tracks in the UK. And when you compare allocations of money, that's quite stark. Now, why do I think it is like that? It's like that for a whole host of reasons. The first one is the tyranny of distance. Northern Ireland, whilst it's only an hour's flight from Belfast, it's detached from policymakers and, more importantly, capability decision makers. And we've spent, all three companies have spent a considerable time and effort pooling decision makers to come and see our capabilities, to come and see the high-skilled jobs, how that can be leveraged across into the defence enterprise. So we're very passionate about this, and I think there's a huge opportunity for the province to really up its game because there is plenty of high-skilled personnel in Northern Ireland. We have some incredible technologies which have yet to be fully leveraged by the defence by defence across the enterprise. And one of the things I would say is, to me, and I have to acknowledge that I'm ex-military, and I used to run programs within the Ministry of Defence. I would quite happily get on a plane and spend 7 hours and go and see an SME in America because they had a capability. I'd very rarely go to Northern Ireland. And I think it's shifting the prism and the optics associated with that. So I personally think that some individuals have traded freedom of thought for a reassuring echo chamber with the normal people that they do business with from a defence perspective. I'll pick up very quickly on SMEs, if I may. We see them as integral to Spirit. We work very, very closely with them. There are a number of barriers for SMEs working in Northern Ireland. For example, last week I was in London at an air capability conference. Not one SME company from Northern Ireland was there. There are barriers, whether it's cost, travel, IT, security clearances, etc. But we work very closely. And that's why I think the big three, if you want to call us that, it's really important because we can pool those individuals and we can help them grow as companies. On apprentices, just to give you a view of what we are doing in Northern Ireland, over the last 18 months we have recruited over 800 people. We have currently 100 apprentices going through their various training packages. We're taking on another 40 in September. We have a graduate program that brings in 30 graduates a year, an intern program, but more importantly, set against all of that, is the upskilling initiatives. So we run upskilling initiatives. We've got 100 people going through that. It's an 18-month period, which is really important. But in-house, we also do upskilling of our own staff, our semi-skilled workers, over a 3-year program, so they become skilled aircraft fitters. So I think we're doing more. We're very well positioned to take on more defence activity. Yeah. We just need to open the aperture for decision makers to fully understand what capabilities, and as I said earlier, the advanced aerospace technologies that we have in Spirit have already been utilised and leveraged on some defence programmes, but not fully leveraged.
David?
Yeah, just kind of elaborating on Nick's, I guess. Useful to point to the current state of the defence procurement in terms of us helping those SMEs and recruiting people. I mean, there's a definite shift needed from that competition by default, or global competition by default, and that breeds a real stop-start procurement, small batch production. So what we're really advocating then is that long-term strategic view, so across, because that means then we're able to embolden and invest in long lead times with SMEs, as Mr. Ward pointed out in the previous. A lot of that is in subcontracting, so it means that we can secure that industrial base whenever we know we've got much longer term contracting. In terms of the apprentices, so that's something that we've really invested in. So we have an advanced engineering skills academy. So we've got bespoke packages for around about 62 apprentices at current. The plan is to train in the next 5 years about 170. From that as well then, we've got about 50 STEM ambassadors then that go into a number of different primary school and secondary schools. We sponsor PhD people in Queen's University also. So it's a case of really galvanising that, what's coming through, what's next really, in terms of the apprentices. But I think, fundamentally, it's really advocating that strategic importance of what Northern Ireland is. That the kind of case study of Ukraine really demonstrated that the immeasurable value that we were able to bring. So again, that's something that we're really, particularly from this committee, is to really show the strategic imperative of the strategic importance of Northern Ireland to the UK and the defence. And again, that means that we're able to it's a downstream investment in the SMEs, because we're able to say to them for the next 10, 15, 20 years that you can recruit this amount of people, you can invest in these technologies because it is assured.
I know that in Thales, obviously, the Ukraine war, as the chair has said, brought opportunities for defence equipment and contracts, and the Crossgar, where the missile section has given opportunities for Thales. But to go back to Nick's point that he emphasised very clearly, there's options for more, a lot more, and Northern Ireland can provide that in the skills opportunities and those who are interested and the workforce. If there's one thing, just one thing, David, that was asked for here centrally for procurement, what would you suggest that government here needs to do to make it happen?
Well, I would say that defence as a whole, and particularly in Northern Ireland, its infrastructure and people, it does not match the MOD's ambitions. So I think that there's going to have to be a lot more investment in infrastructure, particularly from what we've seen, again, doubling those production lines. Mm-hmm. They're going to be doubled again, and then potentially more. It's quite exponential in terms of what's needed. But again, it's to reiterate that point, it's more of that enterprise approach, so rather than piecemeal procurement, because we'd seen that whenever that crisis did happen, looking into the stockpiles, there wasn't enough there, and that absolutely can't happen. So we had to rely very, very heavily on our international customers and our export in order to pull that through. So I think it's that aggregated approach, long-term aggregated approach is the one thing that we would really advocate, because it means then we've got line of sight to know what's potentially coming downstream in the next 10, 15 years. And it means then that we can invest very, very heavily into those people. We know where those 65 or 170 apprentices are going to go. We can, means we can dissect them into, particular programs. So yeah, certainly that long-term strategic approach, I think is something that fundamentally has to change.
Thank you. Ian, please.
So I start with apprenticeships. Well, it's something that we're most proud of, I think. An anecdote, when we first launched our apprenticeship scheme, perhaps because of the history of the yard and its boom bust sort of historic cycle, the number of people who applied massively under what we'd hoped for. And then, having been announced as part of Team Resolute for FSS, we went out for our next cohort of apprentices, and the numbers that applied massively greater than we could accommodate. Now that just shows you, in terms of a defence inquiry or thinking about defence spending, the power of procurement, where you have long-term security, long-term stability, not just for employers that are able to invest in people, in infrastructure to be as competitive as possible, but quite frankly for people out there to go, I've got a choice increasingly what I can do with my career, and do I want to throw my lot in with a company that historically hasn't had that pipeline of work. So it just shows you the real value of procurement. Gives us near 10-year work in Belfast and across Appledore, and it gives us that platform to go and invest in the other markets so that we can sustain this workforce. Because you don't just want to build up a workforce and then the programme finishes and you find you haven't got an opportunity for them. So the ability to use that to channel investment, to develop skills, and to reach out to people you haven't reached out before to is really key. So we have 150 apprentices today. It will be 200 we hope in the summer, and that's a huge proportion of our total workforce, but that's deliberate because you have that long-term security. You're not going to be able to find everybody you want waiting around for a job, so you need to develop that, you need to train that. And I think it's fair to say if we hadn't got this contract, you'd have probably found a lot of the more experienced colleagues, let's call them that, would have not had the opportunity to pass on their skills to the next generation. So the ability to have that happening is fantastic, and apprenticeships allow you to do that because you've got that balance between theoretical and on-the-job learning. So it's fantastic. It's something that the MOD's required through social value commitments, but not to the extent that we're delivering. So again, it shows you the power of procurement to then provide some best practice on how this can be structured and how others have done it, but then you can build...
We're going to come on to social value later in the session.
So that's apprenticeships, I would say. On SMEs, we have 535 on our roster, and I think it's 170 in Northern Ireland. There's a balance between what we can control as a subcontractor on FSS versus what MOD and the Prime are able to choose and deliver. But where we've had total control of who we procure with, I'll give you an example, the recapitalisation of the yard, so £77 million of investment in new buildings, new technology, new machinery. For the civil work, for that, 100% of that has been spent in Northern Ireland with SMEs. The contracting for that, 50 jobs created locally, which is fantastic. So having had that throughput of work on the civils, that company is able to be match fit for future work that we want to do. We're able to strengthen that supply chain for future work too. So we're working as both colleagues here do through the trade bodies, through the cluster organisations, to build through Meet the Buyer Days and so on, to get to know the supply chain, the SMEs, and support them. So when we're going back out to bid for future contracts, we've got our own teams, we know our supply chains, we know who they are, and that can only happen when you've got work coming through so that you can spend the time, invest the effort, and demonstrate a track record. So SMEs absolutely vital across all of the sites, but in Northern Ireland in particular. You asked about renewables. Are absolutely, it's however we get to this point isn't really for us in terms of the incentives, but clearly I know there's reforms we're looking at in GB in terms of sustainable industry awards, ensuring that
we're straying a little bit from the
we have a little
defence.
bit.
It's Jim's fault for
I can
introducing
follow up on it, but so there is a point here in terms of if you're taking a national perspective on this. The procurement that's being delivered through defence is allowing us to then compete in renewables too. So there's a link there. It's perhaps not the primary focus, but
no, it's not the focus of this today. But it just, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind me saying so, this Northern Ireland Affairs Committee are doing a inquiry on the contract for difference and our role. So maybe you might want to feed into that. Just Nick, quickly, one thing for us to do this committee would make things better. The same question I asked David and Ben.
So I think pressure from this committee back to the MOD to establish an effective regional capability programme hub in Northern Ireland is absolutely essential. I mentioned earlier about how the SMEs struggle to get traction with the MOD, and I go back to that distance and the various barriers. If they had a regional hub, and some of the single services have started that, but it's not a joined-up effect. There's an RAF innovation cell, one person part-time. If you really want to move that dial from 0.5 to 0.7 and beyond, you need a regional hub. And if I can give you an example of regional hubs that work for another allied nation. In France, there is, and I'm a great believer of nobody has a monopoly on good ideas. However, in France, there is a body called the Directorate General of Armaments. They have 25 regional hubs throughout France. Wow. 10 of those sites are test sites, but the 15 other regional sites are there to basically ensure that defence understands sovereign capabilities that are out there. And they're also there to help those businesses, whether they're SMEs, tier ones, or primes, win business with defence. The interesting thing is and actually they have very close links with the engineering universities. So they help shape courses to ensure engineers fall into what's required skill sets for future defence. But if you look at the detail in the DGA, the average age of the DGA is 46. They're either retired or very experienced military, ex-military, civil servants that have been involved with capability planning. And if you really wanted to change the way that central government looks at the capabilities in Northern Ireland, a joined-up regional capability hub staffed with appropriate and qualified people would have a transformational impact on Northern Ireland.
Sounds like a recommendation we'll be looking at very soon. I want to bring Carl in, but can I take Gavin first because he has to get away? We're very pleased to welcome Gavin Robinson, who is leader of the DUP contingent here in Parliament and sits on the Defence Select Committee. And I think you might want to declare an interest before you ask a question, if that's all right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for your welcome, and welcome to all of you. If I can, as a guest, welcome you. You're welcome. Mr. Chairman, obviously all three companies are based in my constituency.
It's a bit greedy, isn't it?
It's a bit greedy, but I'm known for that.
Strength for supplies the workers.
But more particularly, the RUSI report that Mr. Laird referred to, commissioned by Spirit Aerospace, I launched that here in Parliament, so I declare that, launched the events around the publication of that report as well. So I think it's important just to have that on record, and
thank you.
Lest there be any suggestion that it wasn't, and that I suggested that this committee do this inquiry to your former chair, Mr. Hoare. So just to put that out, you're all very welcome. Thank you for coming, and thank you for what you do, Nick. Because you've referenced the RUSI report, the Royal United Services Institute report on defence spending in Northern Ireland, and you gave a figure of a slight increase, but the report, when published, was accurate when it suggested that Northern Ireland had 1/5 of the average spend, and I think that starkly illustrates the point. It has slightly increased, but we're still well beneath the average. There's a question here about effectiveness of spend, which is slightly different from the quantity of spend. Could I ask you about even though what we receive at this moment in time is 1/5 or slightly increased of the average across the United Kingdom, are MOD spending that money wisely?
Oh, I'll take that before my colleagues. The MOD is a challenging place to work as a capability and program manager. I have been there, so I have got scars from it. I think your point is well made. So, for example, if I look at the Mosquito program that Spirit ran for 2 years, we invested heavily in that as a company. So we put our own PV into that as well. We ran a very effective team, and that program was a demonstrator program for the low-cost, affordable novel combat aircraft, an unmanned platform that was going to work as alongside future fighter aircraft from about 2035 onwards. There was a huge amount of knowledge capture and exploitation. I would come back to you and say knowledge capture, yes. Exploitation, school scorecard could do better. I think, some of the technologies, and I'll pick two because Mosquito was a classified program, so I can't go into detail, but I'll pick two areas where I think clearly demonstrates where MOD has yet to fully leverage what they've already paid for and gained in knowledge. So we developed in that program, and Chair, you have seen and visited the A220 wing, large composite wing, world leading. We took that technology not one step forward, but about 4 steps forward, and created a single shot, all composite, one part wing. Okay, nobody had ever done it before for a platform. Takes a huge amount of time, cost, single part, etc. Huge advance in technology. We also did some very, very clever technology jumps on tooling. Tooling in any aircraft program is the largest non-recurring cost in a program. And we developed tooling where multiple parts of the aircraft could be done on the single tool. Okay, no other manufacturers doing that. So there's 2 clear examples that I can talk about in a public domain that have yet to be fully exploited by defence going forward. Now, we are part of the Tempest program. We joined Team Tempest in July 2020, and we've brought our detailed design, manufacturing and test capabilities. And whilst we're working on the demonstrator aircraft with our key partners on Team Tempest, there are technologies that we have developed in Northern Ireland that have a rightful place on the Tempest program going forward. Okay, so I think your point is well made. I think there is more to do, and I think some of that activity can be leveraged onto other future programs. But the key thing from my perspective, and my colleagues have highlighted this, is ensuring a pipeline of activity going forward. We need continuity. So that Mosquito team that I ran, I won't go into detail how many team, but it was a substantial team. When that program came to an end, they were absorbed back onto commercial aerospace programs. Now, the good thing within our company, those skill sets between aerospace, commercial aerospace and defence aerospace are very similar. But actually, maintaining people on defence aerospace programs is really important because it builds knowledge, corporate knowledge, etc., going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Laird. Mr. Murray, you've obviously benefited from quite a significant contract recently with Fleet Solid Support Ships and as the outworkings of the National Shipbuilding Strategy, and it's welcome that that's a boon for Belfast, as it were. How far along the path are you? Do you feel that MOD are engaging productively and using the allocation of the overall spend in a purposeful and effective way?
Thank you. It's probably worth just recalling the reasons that the contract was given to the team that Harland and Wolff were in was primarily to, if you look at delivering on a policy objective of ensuring that spend at that point is more widely spread, that levelling up, as it were delivered elsewhere was to support the Harland and Wolff group more broadly, but it was also about bringing additional sovereign capability into play. So Prime Minister announced, was it last week, the increase in defence spending? On a naval perspective, you can only do that if you've got more capacity. If you've got other shipyards across the UK are full, you need to have somewhere else to be able to deliver that. And the strategic imperative to bring Harland and Wolff back into play was precisely for that reason, so that we can support our domestic customers, but also other navies that exist. And quite frankly, if you haven't got a big dry dock, you haven't got big fabrication halls, you haven't got quayside, you can't do it. So that was a really important imperative. And I think not only were MOD keen to deliver upon that objective, they're also keen to ensure competition amongst the other yards in the UK for various reasons. I'll leave that to them to determine, but primarily to ensure that projects were delivered on time and on budget. So you can be sure in the relationship we have, in the reporting we have, that remains a top priority. Obviously, with increased geopolitical tensions since the time of the award, deliverability and programme schedule is king. But I don't think we're in a place to comment on probably broader value for money in other parts of what MOD are doing, because our experience is so far focused on FSS in terms of Belfast, and there is a good tension to ensure that delivery is where it needs to be, that the consortium as a whole is on track. We're on track for our part in terms of, there's probably three parts to that. There's the civil upgrade, which, as I say, is the extension to main fabrication hall, new equipment, new panel line equipment going in, which will ultimately mean that Belfast is one of, if not the most technologically advanced shipyards in the country, and up there in terms of Europe. So clearly what MOD were keen to do there is ensure that you don't just have a project delivered, but you have a legacy that's available to itself, we hope, for future programmes, but also commercial customers to it, and other navies, quite frankly, potentially, if that's something that we're able to compete on. So that's well on track. The ramp up, as I said earlier in the previous response, is on track. We have the people. We need to cut steel early next year, which I think is a real testament to the work that colleagues have done, but also the City Council's done, Invest NI have done, others have done to help signpost and champion and find those people. And on the procurement, we're on track with the procurement of the various bits of equipment that need to be integrated into the ships when they're built too. So that's our part. The wider programme is focused on production engineering, looking at design, making sure that's where it needs to be. And obviously there's a close relationship with ourselves. You can't build what you don't know the design is, so it's hand in glove, and that's working well. But I think those key objectives that MOD set with this procurement in terms of increasing sovereign capability, giving options, reducing cost, ensuring on-time delivery, and part of that, of course, is around that knowledge transfer from Navantia, ensuring that our teams, existing teams and new teams, are upskilled and benefiting from first-rate expertise that Navantia have. That knowledge transfer is underway. We've got teams over in Cadiz at the moment, and later in the year focused on procurement, focused on engineering, focused on all manner of different systems integration technology to ensure that not only can we deliver this programme properly, but we're in a place to be able to deliver future work too.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McCourt, DE&S, Defence Equipment and Support, they at times come in for some criticism, but then I've seen very first-hand their relationship and cooperation with Thales in Belfast. Do they help with the effectiveness of MOD spend in Northern Ireland, and having seen what they do with you, could they be doing it more broadly?
Yeah, but we've got a representative actually in DNS that sits in Belfast. I think
didn't want to say that. I'd let you say that.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, and I know that that whole kind of infrastructure, they're going through a little bit of soul searching in order to improve. So then how do they put things into the system and get it out much faster, much more efficient, much more cost effective then to get it into the hands of the warfighter? So I think previously, I think we'll agree there's much room for improvement, and they particularly helped on our export side. Yes, but I would say certainly moving forward, we've been working very closely with that transformation. So we've had people on the floor plate, 2 people in particular in our exec, making sure that transition moves a lot smoother. So I would say, yes, there's always room for improvement. We always push for much closer collaboration, but we need to understand that the DNSR, they're of particular importance within the sole procurement cycle. I know that there'll be some antagonism in terms of us as the supplier and industry speaking directly with frontline command, but there's a recognition of that now. Yeah. And that's something that we're particularly working on with the ENS. So I think particularly room for improvement, but I think that it's moving in the right direction, I think.
And then I'm going to pivot slightly with this next question, Mr. McCourt. Thales have for some time now been trying to develop a relationship with Ministry of Defence which recognises exactly what you said earlier about long-term strategic view, about longevity to orders, that give surety to supply chain, that give confidence to employees and give throughput for end use of the systems that you're producing. And it has been suggested, and I think there's good belief for knowing it, that what has occurred in Ukraine has accelerated those discussions and they are gathering at pace. So this question is really about Ministry of Defence priorities, how they change and how best Northern Ireland can maximise its place when those priorities change. I know from my perspective, in 2015 we had a strategic and security defence review. In 2018 we had a modernising defence programme and a national capability and security review. In 2021 we had an integrated review, and in 2023 we had an integrated review refresh. We're very good at reviews, but there is an opportunity now, I believe, in looking at priorities to benefit Northern Ireland. And so I suppose, knowing that we don't want just another review, we don't want just another outcome that changes the cover page on what MOD is doing, how best do you believe, Thales first, then Spirit and Harland Wolff, do you believe that we can take advantage of the opportunity with government changing their priorities to benefit Northern Ireland?
Well, I would say that certainly the case study in Ukraine is showing the value of Northern Ireland, and I think that we need to capitalise on that. Particularly in that kind of short-range air defence, there is no one out there that can do that Thales in Northern Ireland can do. So I think that we need to bank that. We need to make sure that is something that is something that is contractually committed to as well. I think that it's, I guess, looking at each one of the different capabilities, it's about ensuring that capability, really. I mean, if we look at some of the subsystems, the obsolescence management of it is, again, that's probably one of the first things we can look at in terms of a practical thing, in terms of committing to that long-term supply. I mean, there was, whenever Ukraine happened, and looking into those stockpiles, I mean, some of the product through lives had not been managed for about 10 years. So it meant then that even some of the equipment and some of the subcomponents that we needed in order to make those, they actually weren't available anymore. And some of them weren't even environmentally compliant anymore. So I think it's, again, looking at each one of those kind of product lines, I think that's the kind of first thing. But then actually, how does that translate into contracting? I think that's important from industry as well. So whenever we're looking at a multi-year business case, that makes things a lot easier for us then to go and actually get that investment for it. But I would say, particularly leveraging what has happened and how we responded to Ukraine, I think that's something we need to use.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Laird?
3 words: sovereign strategic partnerships. That's what Northern Ireland needs. A move away from purely transactional activity with us. That would give confidence to industry. That would help us with early forecasting, not only on capital spend, but our workforce and how we train them. And I think the Tempest programme, which is ultimately a national endeavour across this country for a 6th-generation aircraft, a strategic, sovereign strategic partnership with companies in Northern Ireland, whether it's Thales, Harland, Wolff, ourselves, and we are all in very different areas, I think would be a huge step forward. If I come on to, and that plays into a pipeline of activity, and those are very few and far between. A lot of this famine and feast activity going forward. That is not going to configure companies to be able to ramp up quickly. And we know that Russia is spending circa 6% of its GDP on defence, etc. So, and the recent announcements by the government are welcome. But in order for us to prepare for any potential ramp up in activity, sovereign strategic partnerships would work, in my view.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Echo all of that. I think partnership's key. I think if you take what's happening with our programme, you'd want to be able to have that kind of stability, confidence out with a programme in terms of an enterprise approach. So if we have a pipeline presently as part of the national shipbuilding strategy, not all defence, but many are publicly procured, many of them are defence vessels. We have a pipeline, but unfortunately we don't know necessarily when those vessels are coming forward, and even if they are coming forward, there's then that dynamic. Is it competition? Is it collaboration? And picking up what colleagues have said previously, if we want to have more of an enterprise approach where we are able to efficiently, in a more quick manner as well, quite frankly, deliver the capability we need, having a closer partnership where we can actually say this work will be done here, this work will be done by a collaboration of these companies, a bit more of an industrial strategy almost, where you're actually able to plot that work. It allows us to continue that ramp up, it allows us to plan the workforce, and it allows us to think about the other investments we want to make, because I mentioned the £77 million of investment that's being unlocked through FSS. That's only a drop compared to the other investment that we're having to make and have made to get the facilities ready. So I think it's about partnership. We heard about the uplift in defence spending, but don't yet know what that means for specific programmes, quite understandably, but that needs to happen sooner rather than later, so that when we're looking at what we do with our workforce, we can think, are we going to be in a place where future auxiliary vessels that the MOD want to build are going to follow what's happening? It would make a lot of sense to us, certainly, but you would think as well, having made that investment in those facilities, that there was that continuity, that workforce can be brought across, and you can develop more of that capability here. So I think it's partnership, it's about a close relationship, it's an openness and a transparency about what we're trying to achieve and who needs to play a role in doing that. And that's a slight shift from a competitive procurement approach and a lack of clarity about what's coming when, and even the period of time you've got to respond to some of these, the opportunity to then plan, dates slip to the right. What does that mean in terms of the ability to plan? More importantly, ensure that we have the capability we need.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Appreciate your visit with the expertise it brings from your committee, and also the fact that you've got your three most active and innovative employers there. Just, Ben, I mean, these ships you're building, how big are these ships going to be? When they're sat on the dock, on a sort of scale of Titanic being 10, how big are they?
Mention the
you will be able to see them. You could actually get all four of them. If there were four, you could fit them all in the dry dock. So the dry dock we have in Belfast is one of the biggest, as I said, in Europe. But they are significant. They're designed to support the Queen Elizabeth aircraft carriers, class carriers. So they are huge. When you're driving around the corner in Belfast, you will see the vessels in between the cranes, and that will give people hopefully a huge boost, but a sense of what's possible and people's opportunity within that. So they are massive, and the ability to then follow that with other similar sorts of projects is significant. But not just vessels. The MOD looks at floating dry docks, for instance. Fabrication, it's the same skill set you need. You need vast facilities, the right people, the right technology. So we can apply that to non-vessel projects. Scale, people and facilities are what matters.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Ed. I know you've got to get away, but appreciate your visit.
Yes, sir.
Stephen. Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to all of our witnesses on this. Just want to pick up from Gavin's point at the end. I think you probably largely touched upon it anyway, but maybe just to, first of all, ask you to look at the revised defence and security industrial strategy, perhaps from the MOD perspective, and maybe just talk through a little bit in terms of the change of mindset from a purely market-driven approach to procurement to a situation where the other considerations come into play. So, Nick, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, so defence and security industrial strategy, and I'd also pull into it the Defence Command Paper refresh because it's very important. And I think, especially from a Spirit perspective, those papers very much put exportability at the very heart of every stage of the decision making on a future procurement programme. And that is really important because from a UK defence perspective, the numbers of equipment that we buy are relatively modest, etc. And therefore exports are key to this. And this also comes down to the industrial and social value scoring of new programmes as well, where things such as the social value is there to incentivise support into the industrial base. But the emphasis on exports, I think, is absolutely key because in many ways that will give long-term activity. And if I can just give you one example of that, which Spirit is involved in. For the last 2 years, we've been involved in Team H175M, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's the new medium helicopter replacement, which is going to look to replace a number of helicopters in the UK inventory. Headed up by Airbus UK in Oxford. We're part of the partnership along with Boeing Defence, Babcock and Pratt & Whitney. The key thing for that aircraft, whilst the number of aircraft for the UK military defence is circa 30, and we've just gone through an extended invitation to tender, and we're now in an invitation to negotiate period. And Minister of Defence Procurement, very much when he launched the ITN a couple of months ago, placed the importance of exportability on the programme. So Airbus helicopters have looked at the size of that aircraft, and they've done their analysis across the globe, and they can see a global requirement of about 1,500 aircraft. They believe, as Airbus, that they can capture about a third of that. So that's 500 aircraft. The key thing from exportability perspective, Airbus Helicopters UK has already said that every military variant of that platform will be built in the United Kingdom. Headquarters in Oxford. We, as Spirit, have facilities both in Prestwick and Belfast. An Airbus final assembly line is in Broughton in Wales. That is a four-nation levelling up opportunity which will provide decades, and I mean decades of work, bring in hundreds of jobs into this. So it's a huge opportunity and would provide possibly one of the biggest pipeline activities for defence out with the Tempest programme for Northern Ireland. So it's a huge prize. We're currently helping Airbus put in the submission, and we look forward to seeing the outcome of that. But from our perspective, that ability to drive costs down because you are tying it to exports, the UK becoming the launch customer for it, will encourage a whole host of other international countries to adopt that platform. The interesting thing from our perspective, we would be involved in the detailed design activity and the manufacture of major component assemblies in Belfast going forward, subject to a number of ongoing discussions. But we certainly have a significant role to play in that programme. So and I think that's where the DESIS paper and the Defence Command paper, and I welcome the latest government about recognising the sovereignty of the Union and its ability to put defence back into the heart of Northern Ireland.
Well done.
David?
Yeah, I think just to kind of pull on that kind of export thread that Nick talked about, I mean, it brings incredible value to taxpayers' money because we're able to, if we bake it into the export from the onset, it means then we're able to share product costs. I mean, it would reference the SAD designed NLAW, that is Finnish, Swedish and UK, all consolidated under one framework, and we know the success of what's happened there. and we're able to supply that kind of secure supply chain also. And then for us, for our export, that kind of pipeline puts Northern Irish Defence on a global basis, which has really helped actually with talent attraction. I think that's one of the things that we have to look at, and I know Ben kind of mentioned that in terms of really making this industry attractive for talent. So certainly the export aspect helps with it, but just what has come out of the thesis, it really gives us that kind of confidence to invest in homegrown skills and invest in, again, that much longer kind of supply chain. So, and certainly the sovereign aspect, again, that what's happened in Ukraine is really showing then the need for that sovereign. You know, it's the reason why we were able to act quickly and help with the UK government support on that restock and reply.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think we think we're hopefully pretty well aligned with this, and as I mentioned previously, the National Shipbuilding Strategy and other sort of sister documents and strategies. I think the point about exports is something that we're probably a little bit more immature in terms of on the defence side where we are at the moment, because we have obviously FSS as the big new build programme. We do have a defence contract at the moment, an export contract for the Lithuanian Navy. It's not in Belfast, but it's being delivered through Appledore, which is obviously North Devon, and that's the refit and rejuvenation of a HMS Corn, which is a naval minesweeper, and that's going to the Lithuanian Navy, and there's obviously colleagues from Belfast involved with that. So that was actually one of those early projects that was secured by the business, enabling that follow-on ramp up and recruitment. So where we are as a business at the moment, it's about demonstrating that track record to be able to go and talk to others about what export opportunities there exist. On the commercial side, however, there's a significant pipeline of export opportunities, whether it's, you've probably seen it in the yard, the sea roads, where you've seen the cruise ships that are in Korean vessels and so on. So we're trying to bring some of that learning and expertise, whether it's around delivery, whether it's around a commercial approach, from the commercial realm into defence. There's not always totally relevant, but there's learning that we're trying to offer to the customer there that is particularly useful. I think on some of the other changes, obviously we're seeing a significant increase in the role of social value in contracts, and I think I'm right in saying that FSS was probably the first to have put such great focus on social value, and that's
the very next question.
We'll come on to that. Brilliant. So I'll leave that then, but welcome that, and clearly that's something that we're all heavily involved with. But the ability to create the signal that allows ourselves and others to then also work together in responding to those. So you're not just doing the basic requirement is something that is certainly very welcome. I think the other point I'd just make is that in terms of Belfast, there are significant export opportunities from Dublin, and our ability to offer an island of Ireland solution there is something that we're particularly excited about, and again, utilising the investment that would come from those programmes for other programmes, it allows that reciprocal investment. So opportunities there that we're keen to support.
Just ask a follow-up question, then I'll pass it on to my colleagues. Very conscious of the commitments made last week to the 75 billion defence spending ratcheting up over the next number of years. So in terms of opportunities and threats for Northern Ireland in that regard, is there a danger that with our relatively small base that we maybe get left behind in terms of what is a fairly dramatic ramping up, given that we have a smaller base, and do we need to take some sort of action to try to mitigate against that? And probably a flip side of that as well is it often strikes me that the lead-in time for some of the MOD procurement decisions is quite lengthy. I mean, last time we talked about the Tempest, we're talking into the mid-2030s in terms of that coming to fruition. Overall, should that process be much more streamlined in some sense? It can be streamlined.
So I'll start. I refer to regional industrial blindness or blind spots. I think there's more activity that can be done with decision makers, and that's about an education process. I have seen when we have pooled capability decision makers across to Northern Ireland, they see the enthusiasm of the workforce, they see the technologies and the capabilities, they get it. Okay, so and I think that's a constant harps back to my bit about the tyranny of distance. at IRC is a difficult thing for people to understand. Going on about ramping up, and you talked about the Tempest program. I do think some of the procurement processes can be challenging. They're challenging for us. They're basically a significant barrier to SMEs. To run a bid, to compete for a bid, invitation to tender, invitation to negotiate, etc. That will cost money. SMEs will struggle with that. So it's a huge barrier. Could that be compressed? Yes, it can. But if I just go back to the new medium helicopter program, that's seen further extension of invitations to notice. That's been a considerable long, and we're still not at a decision period, and we won't be at a decision point until next year. How could that be? Sort of compressed? And I think it really comes down to, and I'll maybe pivot onto the scoring of programs, because that comes down to suitably qualified and experienced personnel being in those decision-making areas. Now, we know that the MOD suffers, and DE&S suffers from a shortage of personnel in certain areas. I know one area that we were working with on Mosquito, in the period of 3 years, they lost every commercial officer in their organisation. That is not great for continuity. So I know there's work ongoing inside the MOD and DE&S to look at new frameworks to help that. And that really does need to be taken forward quite vigorously, because otherwise you are going to see these extended periods and reviews of capability. A lot of the work that we're involved is highly complex platforms, and very rarely can you run those very quickly. If I look from inception to an aircraft in the commercial aerospace, it's at least 7 years. On the Mosquito program, we thought we could get it, and we were demonstrating clear pathway to get that down to 3 years. Okay, so there are measures that you can do that. There's a lot of work on things like digital twinning that we can help the process of maturity in programs to get to a point where executive decisions can be taken. But it is complex.
David?
Yeah, I think that was welcome, that uplift, particularly in the subsection of the munitions strategy where they're looking at an always on. So again, that's again something that we've been advocating, an always on missile supplies. I would say, there's an educationary piece. What we're really looking at is leveraging and reinforcing that category or the portfolio approach. So I think in Northern Ireland in particular, I think the MOD would be quite platform centric. Yeah. So really looking at the much larger, if it's an air vessel or land-based system. So for us, it's really reinforcing. In fairness, there has been that shift at looking at more of the critical sub-systems, so the likes of the sensing, the likes of the effecting. So I think it's really a case of reinforcing that in terms of Northern Ireland and that category that they fit in, owning that category in particular.
Yeah, I think as I said earlier, the obviously very welcome uplift for various reasons, but clearly, hopefully, there's work within that as well further down the line. I think we don't know which programs that might be able to turn from possibilities to certainties, and that's obviously something we're waiting to hear detail on. I think in terms of how you can speed some of this up, because I think that's an imperative. You spend years and years working on these and understand that, and that's the competition approach. And obviously there needs to be rigour and robustness, but they've also been within industry conversations about sort of facilitated consortia. We obviously had the aircraft carrier model, which sort of everybody got a role, and you were able to design something that was therefore quicker. That was certainly the plan, and you were able to bring everybody in. So you're also not giving all the work to one yard. You're able to spread that out. That only works, of course, if you adopt that model for other programs. Otherwise, you're not going to get away from that sort of that pipeline issue that we've spoken about at length before. In terms of whether we're match fit or well placed to benefit from any increase, I think not be able to comment on colleagues here, but from our position, we're in the best place we have been, because one of the reasons from the naval side that defence spending in Northern Ireland has been so low is there's been nobody to spend it with in terms of a significant player. Obviously supply chain businesses, but you need a prime or similar to be able to take a decent chunk of that and move the dial in terms of figures. So the investment that's going in from our perspective means we're in a much better place to be able to deliver future programmes than we would have been previously. We've got a workforce we wouldn't have had previously, and we have a greater understanding. I think, as colleagues have said, the number of people that visit, and they get it, they understand it, they love the place, they get the uniqueness, and they see the opportunity to respond to some of the other programmes that they're aware of. It is something that we're able to excite people about. So it's not a perfect position, but certainly a much better position than we've ever been, well, in recent history, of course, in terms of the naval side. But I think what we need to continue to do is to work hand in glove with the customer to understand what it is they need when, and if there is a role for government in facilitating some of that collaboration to deliver outcomes quicker, cut out the need for that competition in every particular occasion, then we can shorten the time and we can give that certainty for employers, for the workforce, but also for the customer.
Well, thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Stephen. Just quickly, Nick, you mentioned Tempest and opportunities there. Will there be opportunities for you with the GCAP project, or is that sort of solely BAE, Mitsubishi and Leonardo, or will there be some spin-offs? So
we're working with the four key partners on Tempest. We have been working, we've had a detailed design team in place since early 2021. We continue to do work on manufacture and testing. And again, can't go into the detail of that work, but we are very much involved in that. What I think, and it comes back to my point about sovereign strategic partnerships, is between now and 2035 is a very long time. Yeah. And we need to maintain and sustain some of the skill sets and the people on that programme. So Tempest has a number of funding gates to go through, some of them this year. The GCAP programme is really, really important from an international perspective. Obviously, there will be future work share discussions with the other partners, but it is, again, it's a national endeavour. It's possibly the biggest defence programme, air programme in several generations. It's if you look back to the Typhoon, which is a multinational, and BAE Systems are still building Typhoons for international customers 40 years on. Okay, so there is huge opportunity, and we are trying to place ourselves within Team Tempest to ensure that we have a positive outcome of that going forward. So it creates a pipeline of activity and then plays into all the high-skilled jobs that we want to retain to improve, the GVA in Northern Ireland and really move the dial.
Thank you. We've touched on social value a couple of times, and
yes, you're chomping at the bit to discuss social value. I'll start with you, Ben. To what extent do you think the Ministry of Defence does consider local prosperity and levelling up when making procurement decisions, and is the social value criterion in their procurement clear enough?
Thanks very much. I think, as I said earlier, I think we're right in saying that we are the first naval programme to put such a weighting on social value within the contract. And what does that mean in reality? It means that we have to report on that in the same way as we do other milestones and other metrics that exist. So it's from our programme perspective, it's treated incredibly seriously. We've got a team of colleagues working on this. And it's something that in the reporting packs, all the metrics that have to be produced and submitted, it's there alongside recapitalisation, it's there alongside procurement, ramp up. So it's got parity of esteem, if you like. So whether that's an indicator of how seriously it's taken, I think we can do more on it as well, because you've got the intent, and then that sometimes comes into conflict with some of the other parameters, which might be about cost. So if you're looking at procurement of a piece of equipment and you've got two suppliers and one is able to deliver that quicker and cheaper, the rules are often that you will go for that option, which means that you're not hitting some of your content objectives perhaps in the way that you might want to. So there is a policy decision about which of those should take priority, and I think it's very difficult to say if you are wanting to make sure you have operational capability and you have vessels in the water that you're going to delay that because to find a local provider of those things. But that's one area that I think, as we continue to ramp up capability, not just in Northern Ireland but elsewhere too, we're going to be able to have those local providers for those services and products in a way that we perhaps don't at a competitive basis at the moment. But in terms of elsewhere, I've said it's handled and regarded seriously. In terms of what it means for us, I've spoken about apprenticeships. The recapitalisation comes into social value. So does our internships, our graduate programmes with the universities, the work we do with Northern Regional, the work we do with Belfast Met, with Ulster, with Queen's. All of that work, getting children around the yard, which it sounds so basic, but we all know the power of inspiring people early. All of that is quantifiable, all of that is reported on, all of that is what we'd want to do anyway, but we have the resource and the capability to do more of that. And probably quite frankly, all of us take that more seriously when you realise it's something that you're having to report on as well. So I think that's good, but we can certainly do more of that when and that's a decision for MOD in ultimately what trumps what. Is it cost? Is it time? Is it social value? And as probably one of the guinea pig programmes for this, very happy to help shape that. But you can grow that and scale that in a way that delivers that ripple effect far wider than just focusing on the core programme.
Right, and I think Carla's going to pick up on some of that skills and engagement part. David, do you?
Yeah, I think that the intent certainly there, particularly on the land area that I am active within, it's up to 20% of the bid, which is that is incredible. That can completely change things. I would say in terms of the understanding of the criteria, it is complex because it has to be proportionate in terms of what is social value to a particular area or region, and then proportionate into the actual bid value as well. So I would say that intentions there, execution still needs a little bit more work. I guess that's from the MOD side. On the Thales side of things, it's we've implemented social value by design. It's an area quite close to my heart. Whenever Thales had originally rolled it out, they had looked at an economical study, so socio-economical study across the four nations of the UK. Belfast quite naturally had come out on the worst side, although it was a point of pride because there was the red flagged area. I could see exactly where I was born and raised, so that I think that speaks to the what defence can do actually, for me personally, and then what I've been able to do for my family and community. With Thales, yes, we've implemented that social values by design and looked at a UK framework, and it has actually fundamentally changed how the business does business, particularly on the recruitment aspect of it as well, making it more inclusive. We've completely changed our recruitment criteria in terms of even actually looking at certain areas to make sure that it is completely inclusive. I think that we've hit about 18,000 volunteering hours in the UK and 900 particularly in Belfast. But again, even for me, how I'm incentivised that as an employee, those volunteering hours and how I can add to that. So yeah, certainly on the MOD side, criteria still is, I'm not going to say ambiguous, but again, it needs to be, the execution of that needs to be a lot more kind of proportionate and appropriate. And certainly from a Thales side, it is something that we've really quite significantly embraced.
Thank you. Nick, do you think
so I will possibly go a little bit further on that. The social value criteria is well-meaning, however, it is clunky. And what do I mean by that? In social value, it's supposed to incentivise a commitment to the industrial base, etc., looking at a whole bunch of parameters. in a programme you will have, and I'll just split it into three, etc. I won't give percentages. There'll be the technical scoring for the programme, the capability. There'll be the industrialisation, and then there'll be the social value. But within, especially within social value and industrialisation, what we have seen, and it is, it is an evolving process. So, and I think some of the scoring needs to be looked at far more carefully. But if I just say, if you reach a threshold, say within a certain percentage, and I'm just making this up, say there's 15% of the scoring there, or 10%. If you get to 5.5%, then you score all the points. If a company gets to 8%, it scores no more points. So it is very clunky, and I think that's maybe a question for, I believe you got representatives from the MOD. I think there needs to be far more fine-tuning on it, and the industrialisation elements of it. The technical piece, that's pretty straightforward. When you look at a programme, can it do X, Y, and Z set against? And there's always a trade with some of those, whether it's performance, range, endurance, payload, etc. But on the industrialisation, I don't think it's a level playing field, if I'm being absolutely honest, because if you reach a threshold within the limits, you score all the points. There is no more incentive for you to do anything more. So I think there's an element of more work and development could be done on the scoring mechanisms within.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Carl, I think we're going to have to tempo, so sort of brief questions and brief answers if possible. And if you agree with your colleague, just say I agree with him. Remember that? I agree with Nick.
Great, thank you. Just a couple of things, and then I'll move very quickly on to skills. You talked about the regional hub, and certainly Les in the last evidence session was certainly floating that idea and the importance of that idea. And for me, I think that's definitely a big ask, and this committee should be advancing that, even ahead of even any report coming out from this investigation, this inquiry. So I'd be keen just, and you can pick this up offline, for some more thoughts around what that would look like, what the shape of that would look like, what the feed-in would be from business and government. So be really keen to get that from you at some stage, whether it's today or later. Keen on that. Also around the procurement. Procurement's obviously a very difficult area, and it's difficult to change it. And so again, just keen to really crystallise what it is around procurement that you feel is needed, so that that sort of longer pipeline can be established. The other thing then I would make as more comment is making sure that Northern Ireland has that seat at the table, and I think that's been evidenced throughout today, that Northern Ireland struggles to fly the flag or be at the table, be at the events. So, is there something that say government can do to make sure that Northern Ireland is involved in those, given our skill set and given what we have the ability to do and what we're currently doing. So keen to explore that. And then very finally around sort of the skills side of things, just keen to understand, do you feel that Northern Ireland's workforce have the skills? I know you've talked about your apprenticeship, but I'm keen to understand about the apprenticeship levy. And does that impact the fact that Northern Ireland's gets it in the block grant and it doesn't actually go towards apprenticeships? I know that's something the chair's been very interested in and very keen to push. So interested in how that impacts, and then what steps can the Northern Ireland Executive and or the UK government take to better support skills development and address any gaps that exist. So it's a bit of a gallop through, but okay. You can pick them up as you go.
Very briefly, hub, I think that could be created relatively quickly. It needs to be a joint hub. I think, and I'm speaking from an aerospace perspective, I actually know of military personnel already in Northern Ireland with capability backgrounds that could be seconded into that. But I do think it ought to be not a part-time endeavour. It needs to be full-time, and it needs to have a regional champion in support of it. So the hub having a regional champion to link back into policy and capability decision makers. Education. I think that's constant. I spend a lot of my time pulling senior capability decision makers to Belfast, and I've stressed that point. We all need to do more of that, both from industry, from a trade body, from a local executive, etc., because that's how we're going to indicate that we have a rightful place at the table and we can actually do more. On skills, I think we're pretty well placed on skills, actually. One of the things which we haven't touched on today, which I'll very quickly highlight, is our interaction with both Queen's and Ulster on the R&D side of things. The skills piece is really important, so when the committee come to visit in due course, we will show you some work that we've been doing with Queen's. It's a whole new skill set and the capability I can't go into in this public forum, but we have just moved that programme into, we've been working on it for 3 years, we've just moved it into industrialisation. I'm confident we're going to be successful with the programme. It is going to transform defence activity, and it's all been created in Northern Ireland. So, I think there's a lot we could do. I'll maybe pick the rest up with you offline, conscious of time.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Did you want to just...
Thank you
we
very
just
much.
touched on sort of work with academia.
I think we have. I was going to ask, but I think it's adequately covered.
Okay.
about
We were talking about working with the universities, but we
yeah.
just... maybe if I could just ask Ben, the other two can relax for a second or two, about what proportion of the fleet solid support ship contract will be undertaken in both Belfast. I think you've touched on this, but just for the record, what proportion will be in Belfast?
Certainly. So there are 21 blocks that will be manufactured, and 14 of those will be across Belfast and Appledore. So in Appledore, we'll be doing the bow sections, and the rest will be in Belfast. So I'll check we're able to share the diagram we have with you.
Okay.
But just shows you which blocks are being built where. But you can see there the majority. I know there have been some unhelpful murmurings from some quarters about the fact there wasn't much work happening in Belfast, but the majority of work is happening in Belfast. The majority of work's happening in the UK.
1,200 jobs split between Appledore and Belfast.
For FSS, 800 further through the supply chain, and that 1,200 may increase if is a make-buy decision. Do we want to subcontract for some services and therefore that figures in the supply chain, or do you choose to do that in-house and that number will increase?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned subcontract. You've got some Spanish experts that are going to be based in Belfast. Is a big team or just management?
This is Navantia, who are the prime contractor for the contract.
Right.
So we're the subcontractor to Navantia. So a big part of the selling point, if you like, for MOD is their ability to extract knowledge and expertise from these guys who have a tremendous track record of building vessels across all sectors, including naval. They will have a team of people on site to support us in that process and ensure not only is the manufacturing of that process going well, but the integration, the test, and obviously the commissioning of those vessels as well is going well. And we've already got Navantia crew on site, but mainly management for the reasons that I set out. The trades are Harland and Wolff trades in Belfast and Appledore.
Will that be sort of people flying in for a few days, or will they be buying houses and setting up shop in Northern Ireland?
Some will be here for the duration, okay. But the majority of the knowledge transfer that we're doing, for instance, we send people over and stay over in hotels and so on, and vice versa for short periods. So it's a combination of both. Okay,
and you're setting up a new fabrication and welding skills academy. What's the time frame for this being established, and will this be based in Belfast? I assume it will.
That's right. So with Northern Regional College, within the fabrication hall that's being extended and redeveloped, we have a skills school that's on site, and that's where the apprentices are trained. And when if and when the group visits, it's an opportunity to see that, and obviously to meet the colleagues that are leading that. So we have that in place today. What we want to do is go beyond that and make that a facility that is available to others too. And we're working with InvestNI to see what appetite there might be from others to make that more than it is. At the moment it's serving our interests, and we've done that, we've got that in place, it's delivering the skills that we need, but we, rather like the rest of this programme, we wanted to have a legacy that's broader than just our interests, and if we can make that available to others in the supply chain too, then that's great.
I hope you'll show them how to rivet as well, just for old time's sake.
When you come along, you can have a look.
Thank you. So obviously we've talked about how some of these big contracts sort of ramp up and then there can be a gap at the end. I remember with when Bombardier were in the train business, there was big problems in Derby because they'd finished a contract. I mean, are you hopeful that there will be a continuing stream of contracts coming through? Is there anything, have you got irons in the fire, the cruise ship work and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's very much the business model. So whilst we want to secure further MOD and I've mentioned Irish Naval Service work too, we want to be able to deliver that. We think the facilities are suited to that. In the short to medium term, we're not relying on defence contracts, because that way trouble lies, I think, in terms of timelines. What are you going to do with your workforce, having them sat around? So as you alluded to, we do have other contracts. So cruise ship contracts, we have a significant contract at the moment to refurbish a Canadian FPSO that's in the dry dock at the moment, and that's helping us again bring people on and slowly ramp up to that figure. There's no point taking on all the people we need for a year's time and have no work for them. So the barge work, the FPSO work, the cruise line. So if anybody goes down to the ship repair end in Belfast today, you'll see 2 cruise lines, 2 US companies. One's just been painted, ready to leave, and the next, the Braemar, has arrived, ready for refurbishment. So different markets, but similar skill sets and the ability to have people deployed across the piece. Now, obviously, we have the multi-site group as well, so where we need people, or perhaps if there are periods of time where work is less, we're able to move people around the group to flex that. But that's also for the customer as well. If the customer wants to be able to build quicker, deliver a project quicker, we can bring multiple facilities into play so that we're not reliant on finite space in one location. So both of those allow us to give stability and certainty to the workforce as well as the customer.
Thank you. Stephen?
Thank you, Chair. Just a few very quick-fire questions, as we try to reach a conclusion on this stuff. Just picking on a number of random themes. First of all, apprenticeship levy. I assume we take it as read that all of you find that what's happening in Northern Ireland to be incredibly annoying and frustrating. Yes. We don't need to elaborate any further. On the skills piece, I'll ask 3 questions together and you can all come back and choose which ones you want to pick up. On the skills piece, obviously you've mentioned about working closely with the North universities. I am conscious of the particular pressure on the number of engineering graduates that are coming through. So what more can be done in that regard? And then secondly, whenever they graduate, we're also conscious that too many are then diverted off into finance and other careers rather than actually pursuing engineering. Is there more can be done in that particular regard? In terms of research and development, obviously there's investment that flows from the Northern Ireland funds via the executive and the local universities. There's also a lot of UK spend on our R&D. In terms of what we're seeing in terms of procurement, we're also seeing that replicated in terms of research and development. We're very conscious, for example, that there is this research triangle between Imperial, Oxford and Cambridge, and is there a need to try to break through that in terms of the R&D spend. And then finally, it's probably a fairly significant area, but the SME sector in Northern Ireland, and given some of my colleagues have done some consistency plugs, I can't omit plugging Genroy, obviously in Bangor, which is a major supplier to Spirit and others. How much of your overall your own procurement as organisations and your supply chains would be in Northern Ireland compared to elsewhere? Is there more we can do to develop the local SME base? I mean, how is that cluster of SMEs growing? Is there more that we can do to encourage that?
Okay, I'll
take your pick.
Quite a smorgasbord there. So just on the engineering side of things, yeah, we have two great feeder universities, as you're aware, that provide, and I talked about the numbers that we take in on an annual basis. If I can just come slightly further to the right or the left of this, is ensuring what we do at a STEM level with the schools. That's really important, and we are very active, and I'm sure my colleagues are as well. So STEM activity, school visits, workshops, mock interviews, etc. Getting that out and into the consciousness of the next generation, really important. And over the last year, we've conducted 32 of those engagements, 20 of those in schools. So it's getting right at the heart of that in order to prep that pipeline coming in. It is a very challenging sort of environment. There are lots of people looking for very high-skilled jobs. In Northern Ireland, as some of the colleagues around the table are fully aware, we have a very young, highly educated workforce, possibly the highest educated workforce in the United Kingdom as a population. And I only know I say that because my daughter was educated, and when they left school, the whole class left with 3 A-level stars in the class, and that is not unheard of in Northern Ireland. So
are they all doing engineering, or are they doing other subjects that
they are doing other subjects as well, Chair. But I think and it plays to that bit about engineering. But we are not the only industry looking for high talent, high quality people, and it is a challenging. There are other sectors in Northern Ireland that we have to ensure, and there are some what I'd classify as unicorn activities where we find it challenging to hold on to or get. But as I said, we've taken on 800 people over the last 18 months. That is fantastic. And for those who live in Northern Ireland, you possibly hear on the radio most weekends about recruitment fairs where we're taking on more fitters and again upskilling people into that work. The key thing from our perspective is those skills in commercial aerospace are directly transferable into defence aerospace. So that's key. There are challenges, as I've highlighted, about security clearances and all the rest of it. If I pivot onto your SME question, we work very closely with SMEs and Denroy as well, and we've worked hand in glove with them over the years. A very, very agile company and very good to work with. I think it's that interdependability on us as either primes or tier one to ensure we take those companies, because we want them to be successful. And I think Leslie Orr, when he gave evidence to you in the previous session, highlighted that Northern Ireland, from a supply chain perspective, from an SME perspective, they have more silver and gold standard supply chain 21, and that's a criterion on efficiencies and etc., than any other part of the United Kingdom. So I think we're well placed, and this comes back to my point about leveraging more of defence spend into Northern Ireland, because we can do it. R&D, yes, we have an extensive R&D programme. Most of that is focused on the commercial aerospace side of it, and the next generation of advanced composites, and we're a significant way down that way. But some of that activity will support defence activity, and in some niche areas, which I alluded to earlier, we're conducting some really interesting work. The work of ESIT in Queen's, fantastic, great people to work with in a very collaborative environment, and only a stone's throw from my office, so that makes it even better.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, I think just to probably compound it even more, I mean, certainly in the defence, the skill set, it's an ageing population, so where we've got the challenges is that knowledge transfer. and particularly the type of competency you require in engineering. I can assure you that it's no mean feat to hit something essentially the size of that while controlling something going about 2,300 miles per hour. So it's incredibly difficult, and that takes a lot of investment. Particularly we can't hire and place someone into that level of competency. So there is a long-term aspect that we really need to think of. So it's how we retain, and I think that's one of the real outputs of this committee, which I'd like to see in terms of how do we keep graduates there. I'm of a generation where third level education became more accessible, but on the other end of it, we typically, if we wanted to work for a Fortune 500 or large company, we left. So it's really a case of how do we actually keep our homegrown talent there, and actually attract talent from the UK as well. I think that's one of the challenges we're looking at. SMEs, I think it's two things really. It's visibility and connection. That's the two things. Whenever we talk about practical outputs of how the big three of the primes can help, and it's looking at long-term strategic value for SMEs. So, I don't want us to, by any means, to pay lip service. How do we slot them in through the lens of the customer in terms of they want operational independence or a much more efficient and effective military advantage? Where do them SMEs? What's their strategic value? And that's where I think we can certainly help etch out. And this Friday, actually, we're working with ADS, and we've got 30 SMEs coming to a Meet the Buyers event in order to help with that. We actually oversubscribed because we had so much interest. So again, as Leslie had said in the previous session, the hunger is there. So it's a matter of how we really leverage and facilitate that.
Ben?
I don't disagree with anything that's been said, so that's good. I think hopefully take those recommendations and they can go in the report. But I think I would just make a couple of points. I'll send further note on the skills piece, because there's a UK Shipbuilding Skills Task Force report that's UK-wide but has a focus on different parts of the UK, and that has obviously some universal recommendations and some specific ones from Northern Ireland where we touched on the levy, but there's things like the fact that the apprenticeship requires guys working in the yard to specialise earlier than they do in England. And we all know if you specialise too early, you might not settle on the area of work that you want to be doing. So there's things like that. The fact that the modules aren't particularly flexible and aren't reflective of what industry needs. And some of that is not actually government's role. It's about ensuring, comes back to the pipeline. If you have a pipeline of work, the educational providers know it's worth their time and effort in investing in improving the qualifications. We have the time to spend knowing that we've got the forward look. So some of that's partnership, some of it's regulatory, and that's so I can send that across with some points in there. I think on SMEs, I think I touched on it earlier with the meet the buyer type activity for FSS in particular. One of the ways that we're trying to get to know and support the cluster of the ecosystem, if you like, of companies. There's a new organisation called NEMO, Northern Ireland Maritime Offshore, obviously not solely defence, but we're playing as strong a role as we can in supporting that, and it has supply chain development is its number one area of work alongside skills. So I think those sorts of groups have got a really important role to play in actually creating connections that haven't organically happened, and for us, for a lot of the supply chain and the SMEs, they've heard what's happening, they've seen a buzz of activity, but there won't be an opportunity for everybody on this programme, and when we have the confidence through the pipeline, we can do some of that forward look work with them and bring them into future work. I think the figure at the moment is about 13% of our spend has been with SMEs in Northern Ireland, so we're reporting on that, and we can monitor that, and we can hold ourselves to account on that. I think on the R&D side, we've set up a unit of the business called Harland and Wolff Technologies, which is primarily focused on integrating existing solutions into our sort of marine platforms. But obviously, that so far has been focused on the commercial side. The sub-procurement for FSS has required engines that are as sustainable as possible, and that's been placed as a contract. So but we've got the catapult network in particular. We're very keen to lean in on some of our production processes. I mentioned the 77 million of new equipment. Autonomy is obviously one of the drivers for that, so to increase productivity and competitiveness, working with universities and the catapults to make sure we don't just buy off the shelf, we actually integrate best practice into that and look at how we can do things differently on the ground. And it comes back to pipeline. If you have that pipeline of work, you have that certainty to go out and talk. You don't want to waste everybody's time going out to talk to them saying, we might be able to do this, might be able to do that. If you know what your forward look looks like, you can invest, and you can invest alongside others too. So it's a pretty simple recipe, this. If you get the pipeline sorted to a certain extent with tweaks and certain refinements to regulations or things like levy, everything else will look after itself.
Sure. Thank you. I was just wondering, is there any point in trying to recruit in GB for jobs in Ireland? Do people see that as somewhere they'd go and work?
We have done for FSS in particular, where they're group roles, so people need to be across the piece. But some have moved to Belfast, and we haven't had any problem encouraging people to do that. We haven't had a problem so far in finding the people we need for the programme. Full stop. I think it's an incredibly rich talent pool in and around Belfast, and what we need to ensure, hence all the work on Future Talent Pipeline, is that there is continuing to be the talent pool that we need, and that's why putting the effort into apprenticeships, putting the effort into internships, putting the effort into the qualifications and curriculum is essential. It's not a nice to have. You've got to do that so that when all of our ambitions start to be realised, certainly are being realised, but continue to be, once we get our first vessels done, second vessels, third vessels and beyond, the ability to know that you can draw upon a reserve of workforce is going to be absolutely critical.
Do you find, in terms of Spirit and Thales, that other companies poach your trained people? I know when I was up at Wrightbus that there was some Bombardier people that had gone up there and they were very pleased with the skills they brought with them. I mean, is that an issue that you're doing the right thing?
I don't think it's an issue. I think there's a subtle flow of personnel back and forward, I would say, between Thales and ourselves. My chief technologist used to work for Thales for 30 odd years, and then some of the programs that we were running were really interesting for him, and he came across to us. We're not in open warfare at all, etc. Yeah. The pool of talent in Northern Ireland is extensive. It comes back to my point about unicorn appointments, whether they're legal, finance, etc. Those are the ones that are possibly more challenging to keep a hold of for the obvious reasons. No, I think overall, going back to your point, Chair, about do we have a problem recruiting people from the mainland? I think it really just depends on those individuals and the optics that they have brought off Northern Ireland. I think when most people come across, and I'm classified as a blow-in, as they would say, being originally from the east of Scotland, but from a place to live and work, I personally don't think there's any place better, actually. So I think people, once they come across and they work and they see the level of work, the skills and the projects we're involved in, they're keen to stay. And I highlighted the benefits of the education system for people who have young children. It's
a lot of people say that. Obviously, people have not been to Yorkshire, I might add. Just final bite to the chair. I mean, obviously, we heard what you said about sort of following the French model of hubs. Is there anything else that the MOD could do that we could recommend that would actually improve the situation for defence investment and innovation in Northern Ireland? Last chance.
Very quickly, I think we are very interested in the Safeguarding the Union Command paper, okay, and which talks about incorporating Northern Ireland into the defence network. We're very happy to contribute to that discussion going forward, and maybe that's a question to take to your senior MOD representatives in your next session, Chair.
The Minister himself.
The Minister himself.
Good. Well, thank you. Do you want to pop in?
Yeah, no, but just to reiterate that in terms of positioning, that the Northern Ireland in terms of that kind of category approach, that we are the flagship or the centre of excellence for a particular competency that you can't get anywhere else in the UK. So it was really just to reiterate back into that kind of strategic partnering, really.
Thank you very much. You catching my eye, Ben, or not on that?
No, I think I was just going to say also, it's all well, we'd all say this, wouldn't we? But it's all well and good having a commitment to increase spending, but on what? And ensuring that the investment that's been made, just to reiterate, that is being made at the moment in the naval side and the broader supply chain is something that we don't want to lose. We want to obviously follow up on, and if there was a commitment within that recommendation that you're looking at all parts of the defence space, then that's obviously something that would be welcomed. Okay,
thank you much. Thank you very much for that very useful evidence and for coming and giving the committee the benefit of your thoughts. Order, order. Thank you.
The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended.